Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Explicit Measures with Tommy and Mike.
Well, good morning, Mike. How you doing, Mikey DiCarlo?
You're feeling pretty bouncy this morning. You're moving around on the camera. You're dancing a little bit. What's going on?
Well, you know what, Mike? I am so happy with people who listen to us. We have a mailbag. People may not know about that, and people are submitting awesome questions.
I think it's becoming. It means people are engaged and they're really trying to understand like topics, or they're working through. This is exactly what we wanted to do: is to talk more about those water cooler conversations, ask things that are extremely relevant, and talk through just all the process and people side of how you work with Fabric. The technology stuff is fun. I mean, we enjoy the technology part, but the other side of things is actually very cool as well.
Yeah. And we love the debate. And I think people are just putting questions together where they're just putting fodder to the fire. Like, I know they're going to argue about this one. I'm just going to put that out there and let that fire burn. Well,
Sparks will fly. Sparks will fly.
Yeah.
There we go. We'll say that. Today's topic today is let's do that again. Today's question today is actually a mailbag, and the question really centers around why are there so few job listings inside Fabric, which is pretty interesting. So we'll see how that turns out. We'll go from there. But before we get into that, let's talk about some upcoming events. The Microsoft Fabric Conference is coming to FabCon 2025. So FabCon is 2025 happening in Las Vegas. That's Fabric Conference. And if you'd like, there's going to be some information down in the description of this video. If you want $200 off of your Fabric Conference tickets, please use the Microsoft partner area and type in PowerBI.tips. We're a Microsoft partner, and we can give you $200 off by using Partner 200 inside the purchase agreement of the Fabric Conference. Tommy, have you had a chance to go to Fabric Conference yet?
No, this will actually be my first year this year, so I am stoked about it. And it was in Vegas last year too, right?
It was. I think last year was the initial Fabric Conference kind of kickoff, and then they have since done one in Europe. I also had the opportunity to go to Europe. I believe that was in Stockholm. Both conferences were very well done, super fun to be around. A lot of great people, met tons of fans of Fabric, and just great conversations. The cities were great. It was easy to get around. So highly would recommend it. If you're not planning on attending, I would definitely recommend you go. Both conferences, both Fabric Las Vegas and Fabric Stockholm, a lot of major announcements were coming out. So not that Microsoft holds back per se, but there maybe is like a little bit of like, they don't tell you things are coming until right before the event. And then the day of the event, they actually do a lot more with distributing and sharing like new features, new content, things the community wants. So they're also excited to attend just because they do a lot of great announcements around the product, which is extremely fun as well.
And you want a conference to be that, because Mike, I feel like you and I have been to the whole spectrum of conferences, where it's Business Summit or Ignite, to like ones that felt like a glorified user group. You're like, okay, I may have traveled to North Carolina for this. It's fine. But I love the fact too, like if you're going to go travel to a conference, you want something there that you wouldn't be able to do just sitting on your office and seeing. So I love that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very cool to be there at the community, but it's a lot of speakers from the community, right? That's the fun part of this. You get to meet other people either in your area or around other things that you do. And you make lots of really great connections. Take the opportunity to meet other people, explore, talk, be open about what you're doing and what your projects you're working on, because you're going to likely find other passionate people that are either have done the same thing you have or a step or two ahead of where you are, and you can really learn from them of what was working and what is not working. So very great conference. Highly would recommend it. Super fun. All right. With that, I'd like to kind of adventure here a little bit more over to an area called Beat from the Street. This is kind of like our lessons we've learned as we were actually playing around and working on things. I just recently did a workshop around metric sets. Metric sets was recently released. It's been out for like maybe a month, maybe a little bit longer than that. But metric sets are exciting. Have you had a chance to play with building some metric sets, Tommy? What are your initial thoughts around a metric set?
So first, I think there's two quick things. It's the concept and the actual practice, the implementation of it. The concept here to me, when they first announced this, was automatic game changer. because this would really change where people go to look at their numbers. I mean, that's really the idea here. It's not just a data catalog. We've talked about that a few times, but this could be a primary point where people are going to say, hey, what's our members? What's our sales? It could be in the metric set. Now, the actual implementation, I'm loving more and more what they're doing here. There's some things I obviously would like to, enhance or modify if I was the creator and my hands were on this. But
yeah, but there's a limit. There's
with all things,
there's probably like a ton of things that they wish they could have built but didn't have time to build, or had to cut features to get it out the door. I mean, this is the challenge every time with software, right? Do you wait and hold back the feature until everything's perfect, or do you get a feature out there that works decently enough that people can understand the vision for it, and then you slowly add features over time? I think it's a very tough challenge because Microsoft has so many competing directions they need to move with Fabric, that it's how do you consolidate down to just a couple teams with all the resources that you need to get it done? It's a lot of work.
We're not going to Best Buy and getting the CD of Fabric, waiting for that CD of Fabric 2025 to come out. Like, oh, the new version's out. That doesn't happen. No, I love metric sets. It's one I actually have a project working on that I'm going to introduce the concept to them. Go, hey, I know based on what you're talking about, this actually makes a lot of sense. So but I'm interested much, Mike, on this workshop that you did and where you're going with this.
Yeah. So when I did the workshop, I just really kind of thought about how you build a metric set. So let me give you just a little bit of context here. So when you build a metric inside a metric set, you start the metric set, you have an owner, you have a description. I love all the additional metadata that goes along with it. The fact that they're clearly calling out who owns individual metrics makes a ton of sense, right? We've also talked a lot about this ownership. If you're building a measure, who owns that measure? Who defines the measure? If there's a problem with it, or if someone has questions around what that measure is doing, again, we want to delegate responsibility to someone who needs to own the output of that metric. Okay, fine. I mean, that might be a bit nuanced because you're like, well, do I need to define every single measure and every single model? Okay, I would probably argue the responsibility is more of a holistic perspective of everyone. The person who makes the model is kind of responsible for the measures that are in it. But in the metric sets, you build entirely differently. My mindset, this is my mental model. When I build a semantic model in desktop, I'm thinking about what dimensions do I care about? Dates, product, categories. Like I'm thinking about the dimensions. And so as I think about the data cube that I'm producing with my data set, I start with the dimensions. And then I start thinking about how I'm going to link those dimensions down to 1 or 2 or 3 fact tables in the main data model, right? So as that model grows in size, often you don't really want to share the entirety of the whole model to users, right? If you have 2 fact tables and some dimensions modify one fact table and some don't modify the second fact table, you come into a problem where users can drag dimensions onto a report page and the measures just won't work because the measures don't have a relationship to each other that the model can produce a data, or the measure can be calculated, but there's no filtering being applied. So the number repeats itself. These are common problems. And you can build your measures to be smarter, to not show if they don't have the right filter context. But that's a lot on the report author side of things. So again, my mindset is build dimensions, build down to the fact table. It's kind of that waterfall effect.
Sure.
When you build metric sets, you start with the measure. The measure is the starting point. So I have a numerical column, whatever that may be, and the measure is what I build around. I pick the measure, and the tool physically makes you pick a single measure to start with. And once you have that measure, then you go pick the dimensions that you need. So this is a total mindset.
And this is all off of an already existing semantic model.
We're not building new measures here. This is
no,
to be clear.
You choose a measure from an existing semantic model.
Yes. Yes, so, you're taking a model that someone or you have already built.
Yeah.
And you're going through, and so every metric in the metric set is a single measure. So the idea is, here's the calculation I'm going to do. I'm going to do some of the column called sales, or sales numbers, right? Sales in dollars, maybe that's what you're doing. Well, then you take that measure and you start thinking the reverse direction, which is not how I typically think when I build models. Right. Start at the measure and say, okay, which dimensions make the most sense to answer questions around the sales numbers, right? And it also forces you, when you think about metric sets, the metric for sum of sales, the total sales, well, that's one metric by itself. And you can think, okay, I want to cut that date. I want to know how many sales did I have this month, how many did I have last month, how many did I have over time, right? That makes sense for that metric. But as soon as you introduce something else, like I'd like to understand the percent change of this month to last month, that forces you to think about, well, the single metric you have doesn't work anymore. You actually have to build a new measure, which is your second metric, to go do your time comparisons. So you're going to have metrics that are single point aggregations, basically. And you're going to have other metrics that are comparison metrics, right? What is this month compared to last month? What is this year to date versus last year to date, right? There's comparison metrics. So I think there's actually, it's helping me in my mental model reclassify additional measures and thinking about them in a different way. And so the other interesting thing I found out while doing this class and kind of really diving into the documentation and what they're building was you can actually have a metric set that spans multiple semantic models. So metric 1 can come from model A, metric 2 can come from model A, but metric number 3 can come from model B or C, right? So you can start building the metric set that has different models all stuck together inside the metric set. And so what does this give you? This gives you the ability to now create a metric set that has multiple semantic models pulling data together, and you can now build that into potentially build that into reports where you actually have a true dashboard page, right? I look at my business. I have 3 different domains of data: HR, sales, marketing, right? Those could be I could have 3 separate semantic models, and I could try and start pulling all the metrics from each of those models together to build out what I need. There's definitely some limitations. You want to read those if you go learn more about metric sets, but that's kind of what I was unpacking. Pretty neat. I mean, I'm really liking this feature. I don't think it's going to be as widely used as you thought initially, Tommy. I think it's going to take a little bit more time for it to grow adoption, but I think it almost feels like we're doing a little bit of the master model and a mini model. Hey, here's the master model that has everything in it. Here's a subset of smaller things that you should care about as a business builder.
So a few things here. First, my gentleman's bet with Microsoft begins when it becomes GA. So I got time. So
True.
That's number 1. But
I don't think you're going to
win. Yeah, but the epiphany you had is eerily similar to the one that I had as well. When I started creating, it's oh, well, I have to approach this differently.
Yes.
Really, there's 2 approaches with the metric sets, to your point, that you could do. One is I'm doing a metric set, a collection of department level measures or metrics that are important to them. Or the one that I haven't really thought of yet was, if I'm creating, let's say, a metric set around a corporate KPI, right? Like sales or something that the whole company looks at. Well, the metrics in there would only make sense, to your point, if they're comparison, if it's year to date, because looking at the last 3 years, that number is not going to help anyone, because that's what the measure would do if you didn't have any filter on it.
Correct.
So it really does challenge you, one, when you're creating a semantic model that is going to go out to the masses, on what measures you create there. Because to your point, Mike, yeah, we have been in the mode when we create a semantic model that those measures are meant to be base models, sales, our members, our leads, whatever. And then obviously you're always going to add that with some attribute.
Yes.
But a metric set starts the opposite way. You're really turning it on its head.
Yes.
And I personally love the concept, because that's what a measure is for. Those are what the metrics are for. When most people go into a report, the attributes are fine, but the common question is, where's my number? What's the number, so to speak? Where are we at? So I had the same epiphany, and this is going to hopefully change a lot of ways that we build our models.
You could even change the name of metric sets, and it would still mean the same thing. Instead of calling metric sets, you could have called it measure sets. Right? You could have even said the same thing, because that's literally what it is. It's a set or collection of measures. Now, when who's the audience for this, right? Who is the audience of the metric sets, right? We're kind of really unpacking this as well. Well, this is not the model developer, right? So I want to outline some additional roles here that go along with this, right? So if we think about the different roles of people inside your organization, I think there are consumers of reports. So the consumer of reports is someone who's getting an app or a shared report to them, and then they can review, look at the report themselves. If you go one step further back in, like up the stream of where the data is coming from, right? You have the ability of sharing a semantic model. So I have report creators who create reports, but they're given a semantic model that they don't really manage, but they can go ahead and connect to it and they can build their own reports. And so they're a bit better than just a pure consumer, right? A pure consumer has the skills to look at a report and get stuff out of it. The next level up is, let's give you access to the semantic model. Well, you're not making measures, but you're able to then build visuals. This metric sets fits, I think, very closely in between this self-service BI platform. And this is really where we're going here with this, is because if I gave you the entire semantic model, you'd be overwhelmed and wouldn't know how to build everything. It's a little bit confusing. But if I gave you, here's 5 measures from this model, and for each measure I outline, here's the best dimensions you may want to use with that. I think this is actually geared much more towards the individual users, the report consumer side of things. And so now this is really decentralizing report creation and saying, I'm going to build measures that are relevant and then let everyone build from them. So there's some other things here also I want to kind of point out additionally. Tommy, you've brought up the problem multiple times. What happens when I have department A that defines a user this way? What happens if I have department B that defines user a different way? A different department may define a user of our product in a different fashion, right? When do they purchase? Did they just try it with a trial? Like there could be slight differences in numbers based on who's asking about the thing, right?
Makes all the world difference.
Makes all the difference in the world because, if I include, a certain property of that user, well, that changes the total number to be different, right? Well, let's revisit that in lieu of the idea of metric sets, right? In a metric set, you could have one metric for each type of definition of a user. Yeah. So you could make the user metric set that has total users. And then in the best part about this too is when you make a metric set, it has a full description of what it means. You write out what it means. This metric lets you say adding all these things up, excluding nothing. It's it gives you total numbers for everything.
Base, yeah,
done. Users. Base. Then for each department, department A uses a metric that does this. So you can have a brand new metric that does some filtering inside the measure that says, this is the HR users, or this is the marketing users, or this is sales team users, right? And you could define the metric, and then inside the measure itself, you're filtering things, you're removing stuff, you're actually changing the number. And so you can actually see in your organization, there are 3 or 4 different metrics for the same definition of a user. So there's a user metric set, and inside that user metric set, each evaluation, each measure, we have 3 or 4 measures that describe users, depending on what department you're from. Cool. And the best part about this is when you use this, you can use those metrics with different semantic models. So each department could technically have its own semantic model. So when I really step back and say, wow, metric sets has the potential for you to really start building the proper data glossary of a lot of things inside your organization. So I like this idea. I'm gushing about the feature right here because I think it's a really rich feature. Let me give you just some caution on some of this stuff. Okay. There are limitations. For example, it talks a little bit about there are limitations around shared dimensions right now. So if I have metric set for users and I have the same, you could actually add the same measure twice into the same thing and give it different dimensions. Let's imagine you have 2 metrics in the metric set and they both share the same dimension of dates, which would make a lot of sense. In a semantic model, obviously you're going to have dates manipulating 2 different metric sets. Well, right now the metric sets don't necessarily obey the unification of those 2 dimensions, even if they're from the same model, right? So if I have metric set 1 and metric set 2, and both of them, metric 1 and metric 2, even though they're coming from the same model, even though they have the same definition, it sounds like there's currently some limitations where the engine of Power BI isn't quite smart enough to know that I'm not running a single direct query on one measure, and the other measure needs to be changed based on selections of dates, and it's not unifying those common dimensions together yet. So
Could be an issue.
I don't know if we're ever going to get there, but the other caveat I found that was kind of weird here was when you consume metric sets, if you consume them from an exploration inside the metric set area, it works as expected. I can again, the idea here is you have maybe hundreds of dimensions in your semantic model, but what you're doing is you're paring down hundreds of dimensions down to like maybe 3 or 4 that relate to this particular measure. In that situation, when you have a subset of a semantic model, when you edit that, if you say use this metric in a report, the entire semantic model shows up. And so it gets, to me, I was a little bit confused around, I kind of was expecting to go into the semantic model and have like a toggle button, like, hey, I'm going to go from this metric, which has a limited amount of columns for this measure, to the model. I would have expected when I'm in the report, I can only see the columns that were given to me by that metric, or it was grouped differently, or it just didn't quite feel correct to me. It felt disjointed. So I was a little bit confused going from the metric set, which had like 5 measures, build a report with it, and all of a sudden I have the whole model, like all the tables, everything. Like, wait a minute, I wasn't prepared for that. It was a bit of a jarring experience to transition. So I think in the demos I've seen from Carly, who's the PM for this feature, I've kind of felt that it was actually not implemented that way. There was actually metric sets that had groupings of things. So we'll see. This may be part of a bug. This may be just something they're doing to get it out the door. I'm not sure, but there may be some enhancements coming to metric sets as well.
So I want to back up some of the features from the cautionary, because I've experienced the same thing. You're like, oh, that's kind of, that's kind of wonky, but I want to pick up what you were putting down about this idea of the glossary or the catalog here. Take off even the idea here of, the builder and everything else you can do, and just that idea of those variations of a metric. This is where the empathy that I think we need to come in, because even those variations, like, well, we count leads that only do forms. The reason why people are so hung up on that is because their jobs more or less are on the line with that variation.
Or their metrics. I mean, their incentives, right? Their incentives.
That's a much better way of putting it. Yeah.
Right. It's not their jobs on the line. It's more like whatever the leadership has done to make sure, like, hey, your goal is tied to number of leads through this funnel,
through the form, or through whatever. So that's what they care about every day,
because that's what they're graded on. I mean, you kind of, as a leader, you decide what is important to your business. And if you have too many metrics of the same thing, it's probably not the user trying to ask for the metric. It's probably the leadership measuring the wrong thing, or giving giving different requirements to different teams. And therefore everyone's trying to cut the data differently, which makes total sense.
Right. And to your point, the way we measure things are a hill I will die on, because of how integral this is. Just stop at what you said with the data even being a glossary for a main metric. And what a win. How many we've talked about the data catalog and people's definitions. Oh my gosh, Mike, like, we have it. We have a really good starting point. If anything, if they stopped here, they said, we're going to retire metric sets. What you have is what you get. Great. Because we've never had anything like this, and we've needed something. So 1,000% on the variations of metrics, or even the department level metrics. Good. Golden.
Let me give you one more kind of like weirdness, and I think Carly's already on it. I'll let her know anyways, just, candidly. But one thing that doesn't work very well in metric sets, so it has the potential for allowing you to search for things. Like, so you could search for like a metric. The search right now in the metric sets doesn't really work so well. It doesn't feel like it's indexing everything correctly. I'm not sure what it's doing, but the search feature, I had like, 15 or so metrics kind of built out for the demo I was doing. And I would search for the word sales. And there was like probably 3 or 4 items that were sales related on the metrics, but it wasn't showing me the actual metric from the metric set. So I think there's some more work to be done on the scanning and filtering.
Yeah.
One thing I will give a big shout out to on there, every time you use a metric set, this was cool. they're actually showing you in the bottom of the metric set every report where that metric was used from.
The downstream.
The downstream effect of things. And that's huge, honestly, because if you start really democratizing your data and letting people actually do self-service business intelligence where you let them build their own reports, anything you have access to would appear where that metric's being used in. So that's huge because we don't really have anything. I have never seen anything in PowerBI.com. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong in chat. Feel free to respond if I missed something. I have never seen anything track this measure is used in these reports anywhere. It's all been custom built stuff. You have to go use semantic link labs. You have to go use a web scraper tool. There's nothing that is indicating to me all the different visuals and reports that are using that measure, which tells me Microsoft knows where that measure is being used, but we're not able to see it.
Well, because it knows the semantic model, but then the measure. Yeah.
But that's the point. Like, it's not necessarily the model. Like the model, yes, we know everything about the model, but like the model links to potentially hundreds or not thousands of reports if you're building off of a bigger model. And then you want to know which reports have that thing. So whether it's in a filter pane, whether it's in a visual, those are two things that I can't see very easily about reports. So as you use these metrics, they start appearing in a list of here's where they're used in.
Yeah.
That's a win in my book, just alone.
And another adoption, I think it's important to mention, metric sets are not isolated to just that area. They're pretty prominent in the One Lake catalog, which
which also makes sense.
Like kudos. I love that because again,
Agreed.
if we're elevating metric sets, and I think that's another conversation, another topic on how much do we elevate the metric sets in our, like in a company in terms of like how prominent do we show it? How much do we push it? We'll say that for another day, but I'm going to write that topic down. That's a good one. But,
a great topic.
All right. But no, I love it. I'm happy to hear about the workshop and what you found, but more conversations to come, I am sure, on here.
And if you like what we talked about this one here too, you can go check out training.tips. We have live events. There's a class called live events. So if you want to go hear what we talked about, I mean, I'm not trying to sell this. I'm just trying to say I talked about it. I actually was learning things about this new feature and thought it was really cool. So just wanted to share with the community here that metric sets are awesome. They're super cool. If you want to go learn more about them, go check out training.tips. Find the event that we have that's called live events. It's our most recent workshop. It'll be up in about a day or so. It should be up by the time this video lands because this is a pre-recorded episode. And you'll be able to go check out the live events portion, and this workshop will be there for you to kind of look at and check out. Anyways, that being said, let's jump into our main topic for today. Tom, you want to read us off our main topic?
Yeah, this is sparks are going to fly. Here we go. I've noticed that there are only a handful, and again, this is a mailbag, that there are only a handful of job listing requiring Microsoft Fabric on platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed. Given that this was introduced just over a year ago, this is somewhat expected. However, I'm curious to understand more about this trend. Why do you think there are so few job listings mentioning Microsoft Fabric? Is it due to the early stage of adoption, or are there other factors at play? How long do you think it will take for Microsoft Fabric to become a common requirement in data engineering roles? Looking forward to all your insights and predictions on the future of Fabric. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, this is a great question.
Wow. Yeah. A lot to unload here. Unpack,
unload. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on here. Like there's a lot of content. So what is your initial reaction to this comment, Tommy? Like, what do you think about the Fabric job claim at this point?
I'm going to go back to my Power BI and that trend because I think that's
where I was going to go as well.
Yeah,
I like where you're going with this already.
Great minds think alike, or common minds, Italian minds.
Italian minds think alike.
I'm not going to say great because
well, we're
at least
mediocre at best. Mediocre minds think alike.
But two people who started in Power BI since it's been Power BI Designer 2015. I know everyone knows that, but I think that we've kind of seen the spectrum, especially from business intelligence being democratized. I don't remember getting recruiting really prominent saying it's Power BI. Like, we want a Power BI specialist probably for 3 years, like 2018, 2017. Up until then, it was still business intelligence. Yes, you need Power BI skills, but very much is still SQL. Python and R were very prominent in those roles. It really took about 2 years,
Mhm.
2+ years, until I would look at a job, requirements, or I talk with a recruiter, and they would go, "Yeah, they're looking for a specific Power BI adoption. We're looking for Power BI growth as specialist.
Yes.
We like some SQL, but it's not nearly as important as it was." The
Yeah.
first 2 years, yeah,
Yep.
it was, yeah, we're gonna do Power BI, but you can't be just that.
Yeah. And I also would argue too, a lot of the Power BI pieces as well. You might now hear positions around, hey, we want administrators of Power BI, or
Yeah.
BI, like, but the fact that the tool was so new in those early days, no one knew they needed an administrator, and only did they. So the business, right, needs to start driving the need for these roles. What I think you're finding right now is the when I think about Fabric, right? What is Fabric? Fabric is an extension of standard Power BI. There's already the need for having Power BI, and you don't need to use Fabric to make Power BI go, right? I think there's actually a lot of hot
Right.
debate on the internet right now around, like, why are Fabric and Power BI together? Does this make sense? Should we really continue? I think it's the right choice, honestly. I have found immense amounts of value from using Fabric and Power BI together. Fabric is it's kind of my replacement for Power Query. It gives me like my Swiss Army knife for Power Query. I can do so many more things. Just having Python notebooks and notebooks in general, speaking of which, total side note, I just started playing with Python notebooks
Oh,
inside
yeah?
Spark, or actually inside the
Yeah.
workspace. There is a pure Python notebook, one machine versus a Spark notebook, which has a potential for multiple machines. I really like this new Python notebook. If you're doing lightweight data movement, I don't know how big the data needs to be for, like, I don't know what's the threshold here of like when I start making my little Python machine fall over, right? But having a single machine to do some testing, to build some notebooks, and the Python I write is the exact same Python that runs in Spark, dude, I'm a fan. Like, this is going to
All
save me.
right. All
This is going
right.
to this is going to save me money. It's going to be like on jobs where I don't have mega hundreds of millions of rows of data being moved around. I might be able to get away with a smaller Python based notebook. And I know we'll see where this is going to land. I'm
Sure.
not sure, but right now my initial kind of look at it, it feels like there's no difference to a Python notebook in Spark versus a Python notebook in
Is the
just
ramp
Python.
up time faster too?
There's no ramp up time. You just start
Oh,
writing
cool.
Python.
I want it. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm ready
Oh,
for it to
yes.
run. Okay, I'm
Correct.
sold. Because I
Yeah,
hate that. I
there
know
is
you have to.
yeah, there is less, let's call it less lag. Like when you say
Yeah.
go and run it, like it's
I'm
literally like
getting
1 or 2
awesome.
seconds it's up and running. Like
Oh my gosh.
it was
Okay.
for me,
Then I'm
my
done.
experience, and I was on an
Sold.
F2, so it's a smaller SKU anyways. The machines were just available. It was
Sold.
quick.
I'm
Yeah,
sold.
so I really like that feature. So
Okay.
anyways, very, very cool, very nice. I really like that feature. I don't even know. I got distracted by that point. Where was I going with this, Tommy? I forgot.
We talk well, I've mentioned Power BI, that ramp
Oh,
up time. You're talking about
integrating the two tools together, right? So I look at Fabric as being more of that data engineering and data science tool, right? I'm doing things with pipelines, I'm doing things with notebooks, I'm writing more code. This is not Power BI land, right? Power BI land is data flows Gen 1. Power BI land is semantic models and reports and all the other things that go with Power BI. So, I mean, you can get away with not requiring Fabric in your environment, but I think for me, the price point of Fabric is so low on those lower F SKUs. I think business units will want to just use Fabric in general because it adds so much more value to, like, it's speedy, it's fast, it does a lot more of the sharing of tables and data that you can still just use inside Power BI, which I think is amazing.
We know that. I'm going to prod you a bit, but that doesn't, to me, answer the question about why there right now few job listings. I'm sure they will.
That's a good
But
question.
yeah.
Yes. I think the traditional market hasn't quite caught up to what Fabric is doing, right? I think it's very confusing to have a bunch of BI business
Mhm.
developers of models and reports. You basically, so I've always approached it this way. Power BI has existed. We had this huge community around business intelligence. And all of a sudden we added a new role called data engineering or data science into the Power BI space. So from a Power BI person, I get all this extra goodness that is Fabric. As a data engineer, when they come into this solution, right? So if you're trying to pluck data engineers from Azure Data Factory, from Talend, from other, from Databricks, as you're trying to bring those data engineers from other systems into Fabric, they're a little bit more like, okay, this is a new thing, but do I really need to be here? I already like my other tools, right? So I think the reason why we're not seeing like a lot of Fabric roles and positions is many companies who are, if you're already doing data engineering, you just hire a data engineer. That's what you're looking for. And maybe you're starting to focus on a little bit of Fabric experience. I think you're going to start seeing more of the roles for Power BI say, I need a Power BI developer, and they better have some Fabric experience. So I think what you're going to start seeing is you're not going to see, I need a Fabric developer that has Power BI experience, which we will get there after a number of years. It's going to need what's going to happen is the same thing with Power BI. The first couple of years, like we don't know, we're going to just have continued Power BI roles and then add into that Fabric activities. And at some point, you're going to have this tipping point where the organization now has enough Fabric laying around that they actually need to be careful with it and design things with it and optimize it. And when the business starts seeing, okay, we have enough need to have a dedicated person to work inside Fabric, that's the time when they're like, yes, we're now going to start building specific roles for, we need a Fabric administrator, which manages both Power BI and Fabric all together, right? That works with the business on the Power BI side, but works with IT on the data side and the Fabric side, right? So to me, this is a Fabric. It feels to me more traditional IT, data engineering, data science. The BI feels more business, front and center, let's just whip it out the door kind of side. And so now we're bringing these two worlds together a lot more.
I want to touch on a few points that you mentioned that I think are very permanent to this conversation and cannot be understated.
Okay.
Truly. Right now, we have to understand the cycle of a company developing or adopting technology takes a lot of time. And you're going to see, I'm sure, a few Fabric offerings right now, but I mean, Mike, you and I are still picking up seashells that are Power BI migrations, where they're coming from one technology to Power BI in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to understand first, until there's a common dependency around multiple organizations, we're probably not going to see job listings be very permanent. They're going to hire hitmen like us in the beginning, because they're not going to sure where does a permanent person lie. Like, what are they actually going to do? Right now, it's very much, in a sense, the consultant's world, because, well, we don't know what we need yet in terms of a dedicated person.
But before we go to the next point, I just want to hang out there for a minute. Let's unpack that just a bit more, right?
Sure.
Is the business what will the business do? Will the business go out and find the need to find a brand new salary just to move data around? Or are they going to go borrow an existing data engineer that they already have to do just some Fabric data movements? Or
if they have a data engineer.
Or are they going to go to the Power BI person and say, you do a little more Fabric. It's in your environment, right? So my inclination says we're going to get the lion's share of the work day to day is going to be in Power BI. That's the thing, because we already know it. It's a known need in the business, right? And so I think what the business is going to do initially here is they're just going to push more on either that BI person. You now start learning things of Fabric, right? That it's going to grow. That person will grow into doing Fabric things that are going to make their world easier. The other side of things is going to happen too. They're going to pluck their other resources that have already been doing data engineering, and they're going to start slowly providing them access to Power BI. They're still hiring the data engineer. They're still doing other things that are data engineering, managing databases, managing Azure, doing all the other things. Oh, and by the way, work well with this business person who's the BI guy, make them a lake, right? So there might be some minimal amount of data engineering that just starts bleeding into Fabric. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think this is a great point, because, Mike, the majority of organizations don't have a very healthy data culture where you have a chief data officer or someone going, hey, I know everything that's going on with Fabric. Let's 100%. Do it, guys. We're going to learn this. We're going to push through.
Yes.
This is not the real deal is on the face of it, data is not most organizations' number one priority.
Yeah.
So we are excited about Fabric. We do everything. We kind of have to, but we love to, right? Because that's our role.
I want to rephrase. I want to rephrase. I think you said something that I don't think is necessarily true. Like, organizations don't find data as a priority. I think they do find it as a priority.
Urgency.
I think they just don't prioritize the rigor that is required to make data culture a priority all the time. Like some companies have great data culture because they've gotten burned on having bad data and made bad decisions, right? Bad data equals bad decisions, period. Like you want to screw up your business, give people the wrong amount of sales information and overinflate your sales numbers. And at the end of the year, people's heads will roll. Like that's going to happen. So, I mean, it's the data. I think you're right. It's the data culture that is not necessarily mature enough where we have that CDO or that chief executive person that's actually sitting around and focusing on how do we use our data as a strategic asset. Me personally, I've seen a lot more businesses focus on embedding solutions because they are now getting to a place where they have some value being produced from Power BI internally. And now they're starting to look externally and say, okay, our data really is an asset. We really do need to give this to our customers. What's a better method to distribute the Power BI content with our own branding on it?
Right. And if you have that as a service or as a product,
yeah,
a lot of organizations, data is perceived as a cost. We have to do it. And I'm not saying it in a terrible way, but
it's gotta be.
Mike,
No,
I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm saying
no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's the wrong mentality. Like I want the mentality. I want the mentality to be data is priority number one, and we're focusing
off of it.
We're making big decisions off of it. I want it to be a priority, and I think again, this is back to the data culture, right? Are we really prioritizing what people are actually working on, and do we really understand the value of that? Like, if I can spend, let me give you some context here, right? If I have to spend people's time to move, manipulate, transform data, that's not valuable to me. By making people the data engineering, data movers, it's valuable for me to figure out how to automate it and just have the data show up. Like that's
right.
We can scale our business so much more. We don't need so many people moving data in around in Excel sheets. We can just do it inside Power BI. Sorry.
Right.
Okay, that was your first point. Go back to your second point now.
No. And like I said, to go back to the question about the job listings or the early stage, Mike, a year into something like this, goes to the second point I have.
Yeah.
Well, let's also understand too, especially now that we're introducing not just business intelligence, because go back 10 years, it was like, well, you should know Tableau and some Power BI. Like Tableau was kind of the thing.
Oh yeah, it was a jam.
Majority of organizations also, well, they already have data engineering. It's just in Azure or AWS or Google, Studio.
Correct.
So this is going to take to me a slightly longer adoption to ramp up jobs, because it's not just we are going to introduce a new product, because Power BI really was like nothing else out there when it came out. And Tableau was the only thing, but it didn't have modeling. So Power BI really was its own new platform. It didn't have a competition to me. But now Fabric has a lot of things where a lot of organizations probably have existing processes and technologies to do so, to do what they're doing that you could do in Fabric. Not saying that Fabric is worse or the same. I think it's better, but they already have their data pushing, transacting, and being engineered in other platforms. So yeah, it's going to take some time for companies willing to do the migration. Well, first, actually, let me back up. For companies to see the value of doing the migration, of why would I go to Fabric? How much better would that be when all my data is here? You're telling me I have to change everything and put it here. And then white papers, wherever, where they're like, we feel left behind. In order for us to keep up, we have to do Fabric. I think those, to me, are maybe just as much as the normal adoption scale works. The migration side here cannot be understated, where that has to be allowed to happen.
Agree.
So I'll pause there. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we're too early in this phase right now. I think what we're seeing is businesses don't see enough need to fully dedicate. It's a really big commitment for an organization to say you have to have a lot of data needs, and you have to understand Fabric works really, like Fabric has to be a core function in your business to be able to have job hirings of Fabric level. And also in addition to this, as a business, you need to understand what does that job role entail. Like, what does a Fabric developer do? Write the description for the job right now. I don't know. I mean, I could probably do better than most of what Fabric developers would be doing, right? So what does that job description look like? And if I look at that going, okay, that doesn't actually sound too far off from a Power BI developer. Well, why don't I just hire a Power BI developer who already knows all the Power BI things? I can already use them in a need I already have a lot of need for. There's a lot of organizations that are spreading a lot of their Power BI developers too thin. So they're looking for a third one, or they're trying to upskill their people internally to do Power BI. So why not continue to upskill the Power BI developers into Fabric developers, or even lightweight Fabric developers, right? So let's call it like Power BI role plus, right? I need to know how to do a lakehouse, and I need to know how to load data with Data Flows Gen 2, right? That's a pretty easy jump to get to, right? So hire the Power BI person, hire the Power BI person, and then just teach them a little bit around lakehouses. Okay, great. It's the same thing as Data Flows Gen 1. The skilled gap, I think, is not too far different there. Now, if we go from, we want my Power BI developer to do lakehouses and now notebooks, bigger step, right? That's a larger step, right? Hey, I want the Power BI developer to now orchestrate or build out an entire data pipeline, bronze, silver, gold. I need different environments, dev, test, prod. Like, now we're talking about a role that I think would traditionally fall more in that data engineering or the IT space, right? So to ask that much of that BI developer, probably not.
Yeah.
But if you go find the data modelers of the world, they'd probably handle it no problem. They understand how to move data from raw places into a star dimensional model on the other side.
Yeah, a lot of organizations are probably going to put their toes in the water first. This is a slow process because let's not understate what kind of undertaking this would be for an organization to do. Mike, I have a question for you. I have a scenario for you. If I wanted to have as many job offers right now as possible, which type of company would I want to work at? Company A, or companies like ones where they have no data engineering at all and they want to introduce Fabric. We do Power BI, but we see all these benefits of Fabric, but we don't have all these other pipelines and other systems. Or companies where they're already an Azure shop, they're already an AWS shop, and we want to migrate those existing processes to Fabric. Where am I getting more job offers from right now?
Job offers?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't go into the job market because I'm not looking for jobs in that fashion, right? I'm not sure I could speak to those things, but what do customers come to me about? Like where am I seeing the needs in business? Like, so maybe what you're asking, and if I rephrase your question maybe slightly, is of the experiences that you're listening to customers, what common challenges are customers trying to solve?
I want to put in the mindset of the person who's asking the question. There's not a lot of job offers right now, job requirements around Fabric. Where do you think the greater need to hire FTE is?
Okay, that's okay. Where does this? So, what is the skills gap that the organization has, and how does Fabric fit that skills gap? Right. So, where I'm seeing this is occurring is in the we have a whole. So there's a shift happening. I think I believe in some degree, and this is not 100%. Everyone needs to convert. Let me just caveat this. This is just what I've observed. What I've observed is a lot of organizations have been trying to move on-prem SQL into cloud-based SQL or cloud-based solutions. When you look at and you ask the real questions, how often do you need this data updated or modified? Most organizations will say, yeah, we could just have, yesterday and older. That's the speed of my data, right? So what that indicates to me is batch loading is important, and I need to get the data to a place where I can then join multiple different sources together and easily create tables that I can make semantic models on top of. I see right now the need is the businesses are moving away from just SQL Server as the single reporting source to Power BI through semantic models and reporting. They're now moving towards, well, what if the lakehouse can solve that problem? Can I get more data in the lakehouse? Am I able to get slowly changing characteristics of my data? Can I get slowly changing dimensions in my data and save all the changes as opposed to saving only a snapshot, right? Hey, here's today's snapshot, and I don't have anything. There's no reference to any prior history. So, I think companies are starting to focus on the current systems don't really support solid and without a lot of effort or time or money, right? I'm looking for cheaper solutions to save more of my data, and I'm moving away from SQL and I'm moving more towards a lakehouse. So that's
Okay.
the trend. The market is trending towards a lakehouse type environment, whether you're Databricks, Snowflake, all the big data-based data technologies, they're all using lakehouses under the hood
Sure.
for everything. So the trend is that way. Microsoft also is introducing the trend with semantic models. Semantic models can directly talk to a lake and get data out of it. That's the trend. So where you're at in that journey, how far along you're on the journey, organizations are now starting to find they need to migrate more of their legacy systems into cloud-based services and lakehouses. And that's the need that Fabric serves, but that can also be served by Databricks or Snowflake or other systems. So that's purely the data engineering role. So I guess my point there is,
Yeah.
where's the business need? The business need to hire a full-time, an FTE, is to figure out how to unify their data from many sources to a lakehouse. That's the need. And so there's not a lot of hiring yet, I think, in the Power BI Fabric space that's focusing 100% of someone's job just doing that work.
Yeah. And to that point, I agree a lot with that. I'm seeing from my end, and again, more of my experience has been on the pure Power BI world where, hey, you know what? We wish we could have done all these things with more skilled data engineering capacities, but we just never had the resources to do so. But now that Fabric's here, well, this opens up a lot of doors that were previously closed.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that introduction here of, well, I guess we want to touch our toes in Fabric, but there's still the concept of what Fabric is going to do in an organization and be a dependency. And just like Power BI was a nice to have initially, like this is cool, to now where organizations rely on it. Fabric is going and may take slower, and I think because it's going to figure out really like, well, what's the value add and where is Fabric going to touch in the organization? The same question that we have with Power BI, but kind of on a grander scale because of all the doors that are open. Again, we're going to have that conflict of choice, so many choices. So to me, when it looks like where people are going to be looking for jobs, it may not say like, hey, a Fabric specialist. I don't think that's what I would be looking for right now if I wanted to work in Fabric right now,
So
because
what does that Fabric specialist do, right? Are they
right,
doing, do
exactly.
you need them to build real-time analytics? Are they building a Custo
Yeah,
database? Are you building a lakehouse and
right,
reporting from that? Like, what does that look?
right.
Are you doing data science things
I'm
inside?
looking for right. I'm looking
The
for an organization that's already set up with Power BI because this is the next logical evolutionary step,
Yes, it's
right?
taking existing Power BI things and potentially adding more of them
Right,
to lakehouses and data engineering
right,
and bringing more of that IT centric stuff over
right.
to Power BI.
We are much closer to the job requirement having a bullet point about Fabric, and then if 6
Yes,
months out, that's the only thing you're doing. But
and
they're not
that's my
right.
point.
Yeah,
It's
they're not going to
today it's a
say
bullet point.
Fabric specialist, right?
Yeah, today it's a bullet point, but as you do more of those bullet points,
Or
eventually there's enough work to actually
right,
support an entire role
right, right,
that's doing nothing but optimizing Fabric, building things, working with the business to help them use it, like administrating
right.
it. I think you're going to start seeing roles around Fabric administrators before you're going to see data engineering roles around
Yeah,
Fabric,
but I
because
think yeah,
that role will entail you working in Fabric, optimizing it because you made a mess of it, and then you're going to also help the business use it as well. You're going to
yeah.
like lead the helm in this space. So, but it's going to be born out of my opinion here is it's going to be born out of those existing Power BI developers that are maturing to a level of where
1,000%.
they're actually
Yeah,
getting to use Fabric. So it's going to be Power BI roles venturing into Fabric roles. So you're going to start seeing Power BI / Fabric
right.
engineer, Power BI
Or
/ Fabric, developer, right? And then eventually you'll see a solely Fabric experience.
like if you want to get started in Fabric and work in an organization who's going to adopt Fabric and you're searching for Fabric specialists, the irony is you're searching for the wrong thing because you're not going to see that for a long time until because again, most jobs also are not usually or can't job requirements are not randomly written. It comes from some template, yada yada yada. So honestly, if I want to start working in Fabric, that's in my interview with the person I'm working with. Like, hey, have you talked about Fabric? And it's like, yeah, we probably want to do that. Again, odds are in 6 months, you're knee deep in Fabric. It's just
Yeah.
not going to be a thing that's commonly on the job as a Fabric specialist. I don't think that's much longer away to you actually working in it if you actually find it in the, like what the skills that are needed.
I'm just literally Googling a couple of things here, and like there's some job listings here. I'm just gonna kind of read down a couple of these titles that I'm seeing. And I think this aligns with what we're talking about here, just based on the line, just based on the hiring titles I'm hearing here. Listen to this. So I'm going to skip the ones that are like Microsoft developer, like at Microsoft, because I'm like, okay, obviously they're hiring for Fabric because they're building it, right? So like, I'm going to skip them.
Unsure. There are AWS migrations going.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to, Microsoft Fabric Architect Manager, right? So think about that. Well, that's what I was saying, right? I need someone to come in, build best practices, and manage everything that's happening on top of Fabric, right? This is what I said starts first, right? Once you have so much Fabric, you don't know what's going on with it. You need someone to come in and organize it. That's the first role you need to start hiring for.
Give me the bullet points on that. I'm intrigued.
I'm trying to read through here. Let me skim through this one. You'll partner with our clients and solve complex business problems. You're going to foster a network within the business community and serve as an ambassador for Fabric into the community of our company. You will go into the job description pieces here. Wow, this is all text. They don't have it. This is not good for bullet points.
Okay, Mike does not like not bullet points. Mike likes bullet points.
I want responsibilities. Really, I want responsibilities is what I'm going for, right?
Yeah.
Analytics focused, working with Microsoft technologies, fostering communication about what is needed in the Fabric environments, creating a team environment that they are all learning about Fabric, basically, participating in the process of formulating, communicating, and executing data strategies, right? It's strategy. It's strategic. Why should we bring the data to Fabric? Like that's the point.
Dude, that sounds like a really healthy culture, but
that's what. But this is my point, though. They're hiring for this role because they need this. This is the first need. Once you don't have the need for Fabric people until you have so much of it that's disorganized, and you need to teach everyone else how to get on board and go the direction.
I think you just got a gem out of the sand, or whatever the phrase is. I don't think that's the common. Give me another one. All
right, here's another one. So another Microsoft Fabric developer.
It's going to be more in line with what I think.
Yeah. Proficiency in this is like not even correct at all. I don't even know what this means.
This is what you're going to find.
This is what you're going to find. Like, SQL experience 5 years, Spark 5 years, Apache 5 years, data modeling 3 years, data warehousing 1 year, right? I'm just trying to skim through like what are your roles, right?
Oh my gosh.
And it's talking about a lot of technologies that are not Fabric, right? It's talking about like Java, C#, Python, like JavaScript.
Are they bringing in a team?
What are you doing? Like this sounds like a developer role that you just slapped on Fabric developer. Yeah. So I don't think that's what this is. Microsoft Fabric Architect Manager, another one. This one. I'm going to just keep skimming through here. There's a lot of them. Data Architect with Microsoft Fabric.
Give me some of those job requirements though for some of those, like the developer one you just said.
They're very limited as far as what they basically, having. I love this one. Well, at least they got it right. Having 1 year of experience, actually says having 1 years of experience inside Fabric. Yeah, because it's only been around for a year. So no, it's just years. Oh. It's an actual S on it. Like you've had 1 years of experience. So 1 plural year of your experience. Demonstrated experience in developing and maintaining complex data pipelines with Fabric data engineering practices. Solid experience in doing data warehousing, ETL, ELT. Know how to use Azure services, especially Data Factory, Synapse, and SQL Database. So they're throwing in, again, those are traditional data engineering roles that they're now just flavoring with a little bit of Fabric now. Proficiency in coding in SQL, Python, and other language for data scripting, information, and automation. This sounds like
that job.
This sounds like what it should like. If I'm saying this sounds like what you should be hiring for when you're talking about Fabric stuff, though.
I would not take that job. You know why? Because they're going to think that I'm an expert and I'm going to do all of it. I'm going to do all the Python, all the semantic modeling, all the pipelines.
No mention of semantic modeling. This is only talking about moving data around in Fabric. That's all they're looking for. It's a data engineering role. Yeah. All this is that to me is a data engineering role. They just slapped the word Fabric on it.
Yeah, and they're expecting that one role to do all of it compared to the first job offer that you said, or not job offer, but the job requirements of the first one. You're going to have a team. You have to do the communication, the management, because Mike, how many people in the world right now have enhanced experience with Microsoft Fabric, right? Like to say that I like, yeah, consultants, MVPs still, but you only have, all of us only have 1 year, 1+ year of Microsoft Fabric. Even if you've done the other things, it's a different security. It's different people going to be using it. Like, so I like the first one much better. I feel like if I took the second one, the last one that you said, nothing against the company, you never said the company, so no one's going to know. To me, I'm going to be 70 hours a week because they're going to think that one person can do all of it.
No, I disagree with your summary on that one. I don't think that's what it is, but we're going to disagree.
Right.
There is another role, last one here, and we'll move on to something else. Data engineer dash Microsoft Fabric. So it's data engineer, which is what I think they're talking about, using Microsoft Fabric technologies. Now, this is what I actually would have written this as, this is not a data engineer. This is actually a Power BI engineer with some Fabric in it. So let me read the description here. As a data engineer, you'll work with the data sciences and analytics teams. You'll play a key role in working on data strategies, principles, and techniques. Mm-hmm. That is purely data engineering. Got it. And then a little bit further down here, you'll be part of the central analytics team. So now that to me, that means you're in the business side a little bit more now, helping with finding key insights and various business unit processes across the company. You'll provide performance indicators, dashboards to help business users and partners make business critical decisions. So now this is a data engineer, which is now doing Power BI related things. They're now mixing and matching this role.
You will
craft and develop analytical solutions and translate them into technical specifications, building data models and data visualizations. Now that's Power BI. So like that's a Power BI role now. So this is what I was saying. You're going to have this really weird blend of like, they are going to want data engineers to do movement of data, but they're also going to want someone who sits squarely in the business, who understands how to build semantic models and reports and all these things.
I'm 100% with you. I'm 100% with you on that.
Design and develop and deploy Fabric solutions, Power BI reports, and dashboards.
Not dashboards, but
collaborate with business stakeholders, create requirements, gather and translate them into technical specifications. Like all these things, this role they described here, this is not a data engineer role. To me, what they're describing is they're underpaying someone and they're saying it's a data engineer role. And this person is actually doing what an architect should be doing inside the business.
100%. I am picking up what you're putting down but that's a Fabric role to me. It's just a subset of Fabric.
It's a subset of Fabric, but the further you read down the description, the more it becomes, these are a bunch of Power BI skills I need you to have in addition to all the data engineering stuff, which that's not the data engineer. The data engineer, my opinion here is the data engineer may stop or right in front of the semantic model level.
Well, and we talked about this too. I feel like 100 times already. There's going to be hybrid roles.
There's going to have to be.
Yeah, have to be. I like though too that they mentioned a team. And that was the one thing I like with the other one. I'm like, I just heard a single person. I'm sure they have a team, but Mike, I love the last one that you did because I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. I think that's exactly what probably you're going to see more than often than not.
I think you're going to start seeing it. In my opinion, here is based on what I've looked at here, what we talked about today. I think you're going to see a lot more roles show up for, I need help governing, administrating my Fabric thing. That way we can basically wrap all of that into one role and then help me define the strategy of how we use Fabric, right? So here's the tool. We have no direction. Come in and lead it. That's what they need.
I need someone who's heard of Fabric before.
Well, that is the role that people could actually pay full-time money for and get value from it right now.
Long-term.
Yes. If you need someone in to build in a handful of tables here and there, like, that's probably not what you need. You probably need a Power BI semantic model builder and then teach them a little bit more around Fabric and pipelines, right? Great. Now you're, very technical BI engineers, developers, right? A senior or a principal business intelligence engineer probably could easily do what we're talking about in Fabric. Maybe that's the position you should be hiring because that role lends itself more towards getting the data in, getting the semantic models done, and then shipping it out to the business. And you're not focusing so much on the administration side. So again,
like scaling up your team already.
Yeah, exactly right. It's probably already on your team. Anyways, all that being said,
I love it.
Great topic today. Lots of good discussion. We're excited. I think this is a great opportunity for us, particularly if we're coming from the Power BI space. If you're a Power BI expert already and you want to have more opportunity in your career, I'd recommend start learning more things about Fabric. And if you go to any job reviews that are Power BI related, say, hey, I know Power BI and I know a handful of things about Fabric. Focus your time on learning lake houses, Python notebooks, and data flows Gen 2. Those are like the places I would start spending my time. It seems like there's going to be needs. So that being said, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. We really appreciate all your time and your ears. Hope you had a great exercise, run, biking, whatever your exercise thing is while you listen to the podcast. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if you don't mind, if you like this topic, please share it with somebody else and let them know that you also enjoyed this topic. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? You guys are doing a great job with that. Awesome questions. Head over to PowerBI.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of PowerBI.tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.